Good rising, brethren. This is Big Judah coming to you guys from California. Before I begin, give all praise to the Most High Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother. Who is wisdom? Who is the Holy Spirit? Acknowledgement to Yahweh Shai. I pray the Most High blesses this lesson this evening, gives more knowledge and understanding of the events of the past in order to understand the events that are currently happening on the earth, so we get a much better understanding of the things that are soon to come on the earth. Had my mind blown this evening with some information that I'm going to share with you. You know, so much history has been hidden. The Catholic Church has killed off so much of the opposition that you never get a chance to hear about the opposition to the church, or get a lot of context as to what the church was doing to the people who were opposing their structure, opposing their whole churches and church structure and everything else. And we're going to get into a little information. We're going to jump right into it because we're going to listen to a video where a guy starts breaking down some of this information. And the thing is that they always got this information, but they never tell you where they're getting this information from. And we're going to be talking about Manichaeism and how Manichaeism actually was probably one of the main religions that was already established before the Catholic Church, and that the Catholic Church copied a lot of its dogmas, and these dogmas are still in effect today, and they didn't even come from the church, but they came from these sects, sects, okay, these groups, all right, and we know a lot of these people are going to be our people. Come to find out that these Manichaeisms or Manichaeists were actually established. They were actually in Northern Africa. They're in different places. But if you remember, I did a video talking about the Albigensis, and we'll probably talk about them as well, and how one guy ran into one, and how he looked like a Moor, and that his head glowed blue, and that he was going around preaching. But of course, they had to do all these things in secret because the Catholic Church and the Inquisition was looking for our people and was killing them off. And it's like these guys are still trying to push all these things that are going on today as far as prophecy is concerned. But I mean, when you start looking at the death and destruction of the church and how they've just been going around persecuting our people left and right, you start to see how the hell on earth has already been here for a very long time. And we were also talking about, like, what were the beliefs of our people. Those were things that were hidden. And it was a lot of beliefs about loving, brotherly love, living together, taking care of the less fortunate, things like that. Those are the things that our people were pushing. And those are things, I guess, that the church didn't want pushed. So many times that's what they were killing off our people for preaching love, for preaching, taking care of your neighbor, taking care of the less fortunate. And those are the things that the church was against, which is just amazing to see how, today you got, when things happen, they try to act as if they're such a loving organization. Just like when the young man, the young safety, um, collapsed on the field, and all of a sudden they're all, you're in our thoughts and prayers, you're in our thoughts and prayers, you're in our prayers, you're in our thoughts and prayers, and things like that. They're pushing all that. I said, but if you actually look behind the churches that they're praying to and the God that they're praying to, that God that they're serving has nothing to do with love and taking care of your fellow man. Many people were actually talking about the NFL and many of the laws or the the statutes that they have, and how, like, this young man here isn't even vested. How you have to what is it? You have to, like, play for 3 years and a couple of the games into that third year are you vested, and that pretty much like they don't even take care of a lot. There's a lot of things they don't even take care of their players. You know, if they're injured or long term care, things like that, like how the NFL really doesn't take good care of their players. And that was something that was negotiated between the union and people. But there's been a lot of TikToks talking about those types of things. And it's just kind of it's amazing to see how people are really upset. But see on television they're all talking about how much they love each other and they're praying for each other and everything else, but behind the scenes, they're doing the total opposite. Let me see if I can find that video, and so I can share that. I got a couple of videos I guess I'll be sharing this evening. Let's see here. Let me see. Okay, Brother Williams shared this TikTok with me, so I'm going to play it with you. I'll play it for you. Thank you, Brother William, for sending this to me. Okay, and we're gonna listen to this one right now, this TikTok. Okay, and he really breaks down, you know, the whole thing about how the NFL doesn't really take care of the players. He's really breaking it down, and of course, the one Edomite that's going to be in this panel is going to be blaming the union. Not the owners for doing that they need to just do the right thing. Say how much money is enough. But let's just go ahead and just take a listen to this TikTok real quick. Okay. So thank you, Brother William, for sharing that with us. And the thing is, like I said, this is what they do. They give you lip service. Oh, thoughts and prayers. I'm going to pray for you, brother. I'm going to pray for you. We don't pray to the same God. You pray to the God of this world. You pray to the God of money and status. And then and it's okay that if your church has lied to you about everything that they've done to get to their position, you don't care. You don't care about the people that they've destroyed. You don't care about the people that they've stolen everything from. Now, see, we're going to get into that this evening. We're going to get into some history right now. But see, the whole thoughts and prayers, hey, it looks good on television. Sounds good. There are people saying, oh, that's what he's supposed to say. That's the right thing to say. But see, the Most High is looking at your heart. And you guys know that as soon as, the next news cycle comes up, it's going to go right back into how it was before. And this guy's going to go onto the back burner. And that's going to be it. And that's going to be it. And see, these people, like I said, these churches, they're talking about prayers and thoughts and prayers. You guys have thoughts and prayers for the Most High's chosen people? Do you guys have thoughts and prayers for doing right for the Most High's chosen people that have been done wrong this whole time? Do you have thoughts and prayers for the ones that have been downtrodden by these churches? Of course not. But we're going to get into some information that's going to be absolutely amazing, because you're going to realize that your churches have lied to you about absolutely everything. And now you're going to even see about the information about these wars and these fight, all this end of times and these wars and all that stuff. That's all that didn't even originate with the church. It originated from this other religion that was before. Even how the churches were canonizing books. I sit here and listen to even Hebrews. Oh, well, the church fathers, and I've been listening to some of these guys who were doing debates, and they're like, well, no scholars would agree with this, or no scholars would agree with that. I'm like, so even you got so-called black people doing debates, and they're still using so-called scholars, people who have gone out of their way to hide all this information away from you. You're still using them as your high point. You're still using them as your basis to what you'll accept as information and what you won't accept. It gets to the point where you need to get the information, pray about it, and have the Most High guide you, and not stop worrying about what the other nations say and what they have approved and what scholars would say about this information or that information. We're going to take a look at this book right here, The Adepts in the Western Esoteric Tradition by Manly P. Hall. Okay. Now, what's crazy is that I'm going to get you some of this information right now. But I first went onto YouTube, could barely find any information about this, about the founder and about the religion. Even went into Google, and there's very little information about this. So it's kind of like, the church wanted to erase a lot of this information right here, because, you're going to find out that the church just copied a lot of their information. And not only that, that this group was the one that actually was the one that the church was going against. And at the church, when they set up the church, when they were setting up their canonization process, that they were actually setting it up to combat what, the success that these other groups were having, this other specific group was having. I'm going to share the video and the links in the description box. I want you guys to check it out. But eventually, I'm going to play a little bit of it, so you can listen to a few minutes of the dude's breakdown. So you kind of get your chance to kind of hear their breakdown. He gave some good information that I never heard of this stuff before, but you start bringing it together, it starts to make so much sense. Talking about it's a lot of esoteric understanding going on right here. But they've just switched it and made it literal and set up a religion on it. Okay? I'm not going to read everything, because a lot of you can read on your own. Okay? But in the 3rd century after Christ, okay, a Persian mystic born in the faith of Zoroaster and inspired by the doctrines of the Chaldeans preached a religious philosophy which was to influence the entire course of Western civilization. Okay? Manis, or Mani, proclaimed himself the Paraclete, the comforter promised by Christ to his disciples. The true name of this Persian sage was Shuriak, in Latin Cubercus. But after his initiation, he took the name Manes, okay, which according to Plutarch means the anointed. Manes, the founder of the Manichaean sect, was born in Babylon AD 215 to 216. Now, like I said, then there's the Manichaeans. You're going to hear some stuff. It's just going to blow your mind in a minute. He received his early education from his father, a devoutly religious man whose spiritual convictions were influenced by Mandaean, Gnostic, and Christian associations. There are also indications that both father and son had a familiarity with the teachings of Sabianism. Later, Manes traveled extensively with a voluminous writer and a profound student of the religions of Transoxania, Transoxiana, India, and Western China. Manes was an initiate of the mysteries of Mithras, and among his teachers was Terebinthus, an Egyptian philosopher and magician. There is a tradition that Manes was, at one time, a Christian, but this the church has emphatically denied, which is kind of crazy because it's like the Christian doctrine, like there wasn't even a canonization process, wasn't even hasn't even happened yet. What kind of a Christian church was there at this time? Not sure about all of that. But you got to understand, like, so you're going to get what happens was they destroyed these people, and then and then the Catholic Church kind of made up the history that they wanted to make up. So you still got to take a lot of this information with a grain of salt. It is certain, however, that he contacted early heretical sects and was also cognizant of the Kabbalistical speculations of the Jewish mystics. He regarded the philosophical system of the pagan sages as superior to both Judaism and primitive Christianity. And see, the pagans, who were the pagans? Who were the ones that had this information? Who were the ones that has information about the stars? You know, Astrology, stuff like that. Space. They were the ones that were giving us information. All right. So they had more understanding. All right. He proclaimed his own ministry at the court of the Persian king, Shapur the First, 80 to 40 to 242, possibly on the coronation day of that monarch. The career of the prophet Manes made many demands upon his courage and devotion, but he faced the disasters of his life sustained by internal visions and mystical experiences. He was unable to maintain a favorable position in the Persian court due to the pressure exerted against him by the priests of Zoroaster. He acquired some distinction as a physician, but his skill was not sufficient to preserve the life of one of the sons of the ruling prince. His prestige undermined, Manes was exiled through the contrivances of the Mazdians, and he undertook his memorable journeys. During this same period, he lived for a year in a cave with only wild herbs for food. Later, Manes was recalled to Persia by a more generous prince, was received with great honors, and a palace was erected for his use. For a brief time, his fortunes flourished, and he was consulted on important matters of state. But when Bahram the first ascended the throne, the prophet fell upon evil times. Bahram, for political reasons, supported the Zoroastrian clergy, and these were resolved to destroy the heretical sect and its founder. Manus was crucified and flayed alive, AD 276 to 277, and his body was exposed to various indignities. The doctrine of Manus was rooted in Persian dualism, but he drew essential dogmas from the various schools of Southern Europe, Mesopotamia, North Africa, and Central Asia. The Manichaeans practiced the sacraments of baptism and communion. They accepted the ministry of Christ, but not the divinity of Jesus. Manus condemned the Christians as worshippers of idols, declaring that they had substituted men for gods and then images for men. The sect, however, admired St. Paul and acknowledged Jesus and Patabalis, the Christ within, that was the hope of glory. After the death of Manus, the progress of the sect was entrusted to a circle of initiates, and these defined the degrees of the order, its initiatory rites, signs, symbols, and passwords. The broad esoteric foundation of Manichaeism appeal to scholars of all beliefs, including the better informed Christians. You see that? The better informed Christians were actually, you know, brought to, or they're actually, drawn to Manichaeism because they understand is there's a deeper understanding to this information. There's deeper esoteric meanings, and that's even what's happening even to today. You see that the more informed people are starting to get more information and more understanding even till today. These events are playing out again and again. The ones who refuse to read, refuse to study, want to stay with status quo, they're going to fight anything esoteric. They're going to fight anything new. Okay, so again, including the better informed Christians. So you can see, just like Second Ezra 14, everyone's going to get these books, but the more informed people are going to get more understanding. As more is given, more is expected. And that's exactly what you're seeing going on even to today. Solomon Reenact gives the following valuable summary of the history of the sect. The Manichaeans were gentle and peaceable persons. This was the opinion of the Greek philosopher Libanius. But as they rejected the rights of existing churches and claimed to confine themselves to the administrations of their own priests, those of other religions persecuted them furiously and excited the mob against them by calumnies, which is pretty much just destroying their good name by making up lies and things like that. I looked up that word because you got to kind of look up this stuff in order to get understanding. So calumny, the definition is the making of false and defamatory statements about someone in order to damage their reputation, slander, and that's exactly what the church has been doing this whole time. Nothing new. But see, everyone today, oh, you're in my thoughts and prayers. I'm going to pray for you. Nah, you're good, man. You keep your prayers over there. So because if you're praying to Jesus at this group set up right here, I said, and you're supporting that church, like I said, then those prayers are falling on deaf ears. Those prayers are not going to the Most High. Okay? So again, and excited the mob against them by calumnies. That's what these churches have been doing. Just like they do today when they talk about the Hebrew Israelites. What are we, the black Hebrew Israelites, and we're a hate group, and we're this and we're that. Same thing, calumnies, same things they've done before. Can you prove that we've been doing all these horrible things to people? Of course you can't, because we haven't been. But we know your history. These things are the things that you accuse others of, things that your group has been doing and continues to do. It says, when it was first attacked in Persia, Manichaeism spread toward Turkestan, India, and China, and at the same time towards Africa by way of Syria and Egypt. Diocletian prohibited it in AD 290, and the Christian emperors from AD 377 onward legislated against it. The Vandals burnt or exiled the Manichaeans. African Manichaeism is known to us chiefly through the works of St. Augustine, okay, who wrote long treatises against its doctors after having been their pupil. So he learns from them. He was actually a Manichaeist himself. He actually converted, and he was a Manichaeist. We're going to read a little bit about that. St. Augustine was actually part of this group. And a guy actually, we're going to listen to a little bit of his video, talks about that. I'm not sure if we're going to listen to that part, but he makes reference to the fact that St. Augustine was part of the Manichaean, he was a Manichaean, part of Manichaeism. But then he tries to explain it away, because he couldn't have sinned and this, and that, and he could have debated all this stuff. But you know how it always is. They can't speak for themselves. The Manichaeists can't speak for themselves. They can't defend their positions because you killed them all. So you guys tell them, why, St. Augustine was with them and why he left. I said, that's all. You're getting one side of the story as usual. Okay. In the East, the sect was almost exterminated by the severity of Justinian, but it formed again in Asia Minor. We read of the Paulicians in Armenia, okay, and we're going to stop right there, I think, on that one, and skip over to page 13. Okay, we're not going to read page 12, we're going to skip over to page 13. I wanted you guys to see. Let's see here. Mm-hmm. I'm going to skip on down to St. Augustine, okay? Now, probably have to read some more of the 12 because, like I said, it talks about the, many of the aspects of Manichaeism, and like I said, very positive. You know, many positive things that they were pushing. That the church didn't want. But check this out: Saint Augustine was drawn to Manichaeism because it interpreted the Christian religion in terms acceptable to his inquiring mind. He had already decided that the church was ridden with superstition and lacked philosophical depth. And that's exactly what is same thing's going on today. He remained absorbed in this so-called heresy for 9 years, but was never able to penetrate deeply enough into the mysticism of the sect to overlook the shortcomings of the members. Certainly, his subsequent opinions were influenced by his association with the followers of Manes. He departed from them through a disinterest in mysticism, for which his intellect was not suited. The church, in the treatment of the Manichaeans, followed its usual procedure of accusing all heretical groups of practicing immoral and infernal rites. St. Augustine, who had an intimate knowledge of the sect, made no such accusations. So the church was making all these accusations, but St. Augustine, who was actually part of the group, never made those kind of accusations. And he would actually know because he had a much more intimate understanding of what was going on with the group. His temperament would have inclined him to do so had there been any reasonable grounds. After departing from the heresy of Manes, St. Augustine came under the influence of Bishop Ambrose, a fine and noble man addicted to the teachings of Origen. Okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to play a little bit. Hold on here quick. I'm going to play a little bit of this video, and I'm going to put it in the description box so you guys can check it out. It's about an hour long video. This is this let's see here. The name of the group is called, or the channel is called, the Exodus Project. Okay, the Exodus Project. I'm going to start about 8.5 minutes into the video. Okay, let's go about 8.5 minutes into the video. Here we go. He comprised his own canon early that he wrote. Actually, let me go back a little bit. One of those, but what made Manichaeism so successful is they started out real quick, and Manny himself wrote. He wrote his own. He comprised his own canon early that he wrote, and the first book in his canon was called the Living Gospel or the Great Gospel. Some called it the Evangelion. He had another book called the Treasure of Life. In the Pragmatea or Treatise Essay, in the Book of Mysteries, in the Book of Giants, in the Letters and Psalms and Prayers. Those were allegedly written by his hand, and that was kind of their canon. And so the whole idea of canonizing books and everything else came from Manichaeism. Did not come from the Catholic Church. That's huge. And see, and you got people over here talking about these church fathers and canonization and whatever else, and you're going to see the reason as to why the Catholic Church had to canonize these books. There was a reasoning why they had to canonize books, and they had to do it quickly. Okay, what was their motivation? What was the church's motivation? Just continue. The idea of canonization may have even been seen by the early church as a necessity. But here's one point, Steve, is if you ask any Christian, okay, about the war in heaven, okay, most of them will tell you it happened before Adam and Eve, okay? And this is a Manichaean idea for sure. But if it's not found anywhere in the Christian text, right. And if you look even in the book of Revelations, they talk about that being a war in the final times, and that has to do definitively with these three stages of cosmic history that Manichaeans pushed, and the whole idea of the fall of Lucifer in the past. The notion comes from Manichaean theology clearly, and yet they see that the whole war in heaven, the fall of Lucifer, that's not even has nothing to do with Christianity in the first place. has to do with Manichaeism. And you're going to find out that with the Manichaeism, and Manichaeism, like eschatology and final days and end days things, is something huge with them. So all of a sudden, then the church had to kind of follow along and everything else. So they're going to talk about, the canonization or the inclusion of the Book of Revelation, how they had to do that way later because of the influence of Manichaeism. Because it wasn't even, I guess, the Book of Revelation didn't even get canonized till way later. But everybody's talking about, they're talking about the Book of Revelation like it's been there the whole time, and it was in there, and then the motivation was it had to find something to go against Manichaeism. Let's continue.
Had their own distinct terminology, just like you see a lot of Christians today have their own terminology, right? And words mean different things, and it was considered a Gnostic religion generally in North Africa, and Gnostics are like academics today. They think that by knowledge you can get anything you need in life, and so they tried to be studied people, but they had a structure. They had a simple structure where Manny was the prophet or leader, and of course he had 12 apostles under him, and then they had 72 below that, and another 360 below that, and then they had the elect below that, which were 360 members, and then below that they had the laity.
So it sounds like a lot of the stuff that the church was copying, they were copying it from from Manichaeism, putting their God or Jesus at the top, 12 apostles right there, right? 72 teachers underneath there. That goes also kind of like with Moses teaching the 70. But let's go ahead and continue.
And so they had clear and distinct structure in big hat syndrome, but understanding who they were and the atmosphere in which they were thriving in the third and fourth century into the fifth century, they were still booming. This is what the Roman Empire was facing. It probably got a lot of the ideas of development. And people need to realize, as we touched on the last time about the Christian canon, that's all you need to look at is the canonization process of Christianity to find out how fallacious it is. Just look at the canonization process. Everybody knows that after Constantine, that they had the Council of Nicaea, and they hammered out the certain church doctrines. But Manichaean was clear. Jesus in Manichaeism was not divine in any way, shape, or form. They did consider him a prophet, like you mentioned, and they just worked that into their rhetoric. And Manny actually called himself the Paraclete, endorsed by Jesus, that he was the fulfillment. And that was the atmosphere in the third century. Nobody could say different because they didn't have their doctrine of the Holy Spirit. It just didn't exist.
So the church couldn't even combat any of the stuff that Manny was saying, or the Manichaeans were saying, because they hadn't even set up a doctrine yet. They hadn't even set up, they had not even set up their doctrine. They didn't have canonized books. They didn't have any of this stuff. See, but this is why they had to hide all this information, because they're coming from, they're having to get this information. Well, they're having to set up a church to go against this religion that's growing like crazy, and they don't want to let the world know that they weren't the first. We're the first church. We're this. We're that. Well, there was already a church going on. There was a church before you, and it was experiencing a lot of success, and you were trying your best to combat it, and that's why you're canonizing books and stuff like that. Let's continue.
So who could say anything else otherwise, right? Exactly. So it seems when the Council of Nicaea made their selection, they were basically doing it to oppose Manichaeism, and distance themselves from it.
And that's huge. When they were setting up their canonization processes, they weren't just doing it okay, these books are good. They were doing it to go against Manichaeism. That was a religion that they were going against. And that's why they were setting up certain books and choosing certain books. And they were to go against Manichaeism to set up their own doctrine. I'm going to rewind that so you can hear that again.
By declaring were basically doing. So who could say anything else otherwise, right?
Exactly.
So it seems when the Council of Nicaea made their selection, they were basically doing it to oppose Manichaeism and distance themselves from it by declaring the divinity of their God man and their doctrine of the Holy Spirit but even the Manichaeist view on Almighty God and how things break down. I mean, they basically believe that light and dark has been fought and merged together in some way, shape, or form, and that light can be brought out of the things of nature. And it just basically left them, like I said, in a round room, so they couldn't get cornered, and they could basically win any argument. But
it really does sound like a blend of Eastern, Western, and Middle Eastern religions all just mashed into one.
Yeah, mashed into one. But if you look at the writings of Eusebius from around 380 about the Manichaeans, Eusebius considered the word we use for mania today comes from the word mani, and he played up on that because that was how they evangelized. They would subtly get into a community and learn the local narrative of belief structure, and then push their two roots. And
it's funny how they make it sound like that's what Manichaeism was doing and Manny was doing, but that really sounds like a lot like what the church actually did. They would go into different groups, different areas, and like, oh no, we're the same. Just like we're all the same. It's the same thing. Like they did when they went into Britain and Ireland. Oh, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. They try to make it sound like it's the Manichaeists that were doing that, but actually the church was doing stuff like that.
And 3 stages of cosmic history. Nobody could deny that evil existed in some state or form. So you had light and darkness, and no sane person would deny that there's been a past and a present and a future. But that all meant different things. The Manichaeans were highly eschatological. They believed that they were living in the final days, and everybody that wasn't with them was against them, as we see in a lot of Christianity today. And they really pushed that everywhere they were.
For the last 2,000 years.
Yeah, and so in the life of Manny, he actually was able to persuade 2 of the Sassanid rulers, and was given a degree of freedom and liberty and endorsement to move through the Persian Empire into India, and then eventually into the East. And he got such a foothold and was getting sponsored by all the people at the bottom of the ranks. And when you look at the atmosphere of what was going on after Eusebius, especially when Diocletian came in the
we'll stop it at that. I'll leave the link in the description box. You guys will be able to go ahead and check that. But so you can see that there was a religion that was already set up. And they can try to sit there and down talk it and talk about all the horrible things and the bad things that they did and whatever else and the bad doctrines they had and stuff like that. But the Christian church copied a lot of the information that they had, and they copied a lot of the things that they did as far as canonizing. Now you understand why they had to canonize books, because there was already religion there that was already successful, and it was doing well, and people were drawn to it, and the church didn't want that, so therefore they had to set up theirs. And this group was highly eschatological. They were into eschatology. They were into final days, last days, and just like the Christian churches today. So they copied a lot of that from the Manichaeans. But of course, their breakdown of all the final day stuff is all backwards, because the scriptures that they used, that they canonized, was not dealing with the Gentiles, was not dealing with the heathens. It was dealing with the Israelites, and it was dealing with how the Most High is going to be dealing with them. That's why the stuff that they're talking about right now makes absolutely no sense. That's why you can see story after story about prepping, getting this ready, prepping for this, prepping for that. this is going to happen. Or we got plans to move into Iran. We got plans to move into Saudi Arabia. Ukraine's doing this, Russia's doing that, and nothing's really happening because the scriptures have nothing to do with them. All praise is the Most High, Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother. Who was wisdom? Who was the Holy Spirit? Acknowledgement to Yahweh Shai. Shalom.